you're just floating. You're hearing the sound of the ice crackling in the water. Maybe you might hear the sound of an iceberg calving. You hear the sound of a faint sound, maybe of the colony of the penguins.
Well, if last week's show had an undertone of back in the USSR, cue the song, today we invite back onto the show the explorer, Nikon ambassador and celebrated wildlife photographer Michelle Valberg, who travelled south to the Antarctic Peninsula following her conversation with us to make the most extraordinary photographs in what can be very bleak, certainly very cold conditions. Pictures of animals for whom cold water immersion isn't a challenge. It's just another day at the Office of Wildlife. We talk about the places Michelle has visited, photographed and even sound recorded. You know me with sound. One part of our conversation in particular actually fascinated me. The sound of the ice, and in particular icebergs. Anyway, Michelle had her telephoto trained on the icebergs and has brought back the most incredibly powerful pictures, which will be on the show page today. I feel I'm somewhat shoehorning this slightly into the introduction as I walk the paths of Greenham Common for today's photo walk. Though it is the title of today's show, but talking of lenses, and in this case the powerful magnification you can achieve from and with a zoom and referencing the icebergs, it's thought, I went down a rather long rabbit hole with this particular subject, but it's thought that had the lookout in the crow's nest of one RMS Titanic, a young lad called Frederick Fleet, had he been issued with standard binoculars that fateful night of the 14th of April 1912, it's considered very likely that the iceberg that struck her would have been seen far, far earlier. Even more incredible is the fact that Fred Fleet, who did man one of the lifeboats actually that escaped into the night, well, he went on to continue working for the White Star Line until the mid-30s, and he was even asked to climb the ladder to the crow's nest to become lookout for the Titanic's sister ship, the Olympic. I'm assuming HR worked in somewhat different ways in those days. And it's one of those badly quoted lines, by the way. He didn't say, "Iceberg, dead ahead," as people often misquote. It was "Iceberg right ahead." The movie was accurate on that particular one. Anyway, Michelle talks about her trip south to photograph wildlife, the incredible sights which she also shares on the show page today pictorially. And sandwiched between my two conversational parts with her, since it's the second week of the month, Valérie Jardin is back to talk about making photo projects. And the project that I've asked her to talk about is called On Ice. We don't just throw this thing together, There is actually a plan.
Today on the Photo Walk.
I think what gives me such a greater appreciation too when I see the humpbacks on the surface, knowing and having experienced them underwater, to see that and their movements and to see their gracefulness and their beauty underwater. When you're amongst this kind of natural wonder and beauty, I always find myself privileged. I guess that's why I say humbled, probably, because I there's never a moment that no matter what animal it is, really, because they're allowing you to be part of their world, to be that close to them too, to look eye to eye with a humpback whale underwater. I find this all really hard to explain, as you can tell. And then they're like, petrol over here, petrol over there, everyone's screaming for you because they want you to get the shot.
Michelle Valberg, who along with Valérie Jardin, they're both my guests today. And before I give you a flavour of today's mailbag and what we're talking about, thank you to our extra milers and MPB who sponsor this show and keep it here week on week. MPB or mpb.com is a website where you can safely buy, sell and trade quality used photo and video gear online and be a part of the circular economy. Right now, I've been saying this the last 3 or 4 weeks, I think, as camera bodies are currently in high demand. MPB is after your camera body if you've stopped using it, and they've increased the amount you can get paid for that body too. Here's how it works. You go to mpb.com, you click the button at the top of the website that says Start Selling and Trading. Just follow the very easy instructions where you're prompted to enter the model name and click a box for the condition of it. And from there, your kit's collected from your front door and MPB pays you for your camera gear within 1 or 2 days. And here's a bonus. If your gear is in better condition than expected, they'll automatically increase the amount you get paid. MPB's price commitment provides the right price up front, and they provide instant quotes that are guaranteed for 14 days, and they never add hidden fees. Go to mpb.com, and as always, there will be a link on the show page today. On the show, stuck in a watery rut in East Africa in a van called Jonas. Why or how imposter syndrome can prevent us from contributing creatively to the universe, and how we find an outlet, I suppose, to escape its clutches. Making projects, putting those projects on the wall, and on that note, it being the second Friday of the month, street photographer and photography mentor Valérie Jardin is here with visual stories. This month we're talking about the projects on ice. Right, shall we walk? Checklist out. Coffee, check. Garibaldi's, check. Walking boots, yeah, check. Shoes in my case still, because I don't have those leaky boots sorted. And I guess today, what with the extreme cold in the stories that we have, well, particularly when I talk to Michelle Valberg, a good wind cheater, check. Okay, let's walk. It's quite a windy day, actually, up on the common. I'm getting photographs of a very different nature to this time 24 hours ago, when this place was absolutely consumed by an early morning mist. You could honestly not see more than 30, 40 metres ahead of you. Most extraordinary pictures I would have got had I brought my camera. I know. I did kick myself for you. And so today a lot clearer, but a lot more brisk. I keep meaning to take a photo walk up to the White Horse, which is this huge chalk white horse in the side of quite a steep climb of a hill just west of where I live. But I have to do that on a day where there isn't a brisk wind. Otherwise, you wouldn't hear anything on the microphone whatsoever. And guess who's come along today? Barnes, come on. I've got Barney, yes. He hasn't been on the show for a good couple of months. It feels like a couple of months anyway. And, he's with me today. No doubt he'll put his pennyworth in later on when he'd like a treat, as he normally does. Welcome along as we make our Photo Walk, a show where we walk and make pictures, photographically sketchbooking our time together each week, enjoying the letters and inspirational stories and the photographs that you've sent in that bless the show page for episode number 423 today. Actually, we have two fairly lengthy letters today. You've been hard at work creating your letters. You certainly have. And yes, let's start with one from Andrew Gardner. In the early 2000s, says Andrew, I was given a chance to go to Kenya to join a Christian mission to the Maasai people. Our link to the area was a witch doctor's son who'd renounced his father's tradition for a new faith. I suppose now the term would be, is it healer now? That's the term that's more widely used these days, isn't it? This was my first major trip abroad, and it didn't start very well. I was doubting I'd ever get there because the flight was so turbulent. They stopped serving hot drinks, and then I was doubting my ability to survive 2 further weeks eating goat stew, boiled cabbage and rice. And that was only because I could barely get the lid from a little cup of sealed orange juice they'd given us on the in-flight breakfast. It's an interesting thing, isn't it, Andrew? I know you're comparing it to barely being able to open your tub, your carton of orange juice. But when we travel abroad, often I think the food is quite a large, for me anyway, quite a large proportion of the adventure. The food for me is very much part of the adventure, that's for sure. Anyway, once in Nairobi, we had a long drive to the town of Narok, which takes you down into the Great Rift Valley. Sounds glorious. We stopped at a well-known tourist destination to take in the stunning, awe-inspiring view of Maasai land sprawled out below us. After leaving the town, the roads slowly deteriorated and then became absolute mud tracks with deep gullies either side. I don't like where this story's going. It was getting late and the sun sets really quickly near the equator, I know. We were in the back of an old 1950s Mercedes truck called Jonah, being bounced all over the show. I love that the truck has a name. Already I'm liking the truck. The mud finally got the better of our very skilled but no doubt tired driver, and that's how the truck ended up, stuck fast in the mud. The decision was taken that half of our team would stay with Jonah. See, Jonah needs some company. And the other half, myself included, would brave the dark, hilly terrain to try and find a bed for the night. We walked some distance with our former witch doctor, now pastor, leading the way, and when we came upon a household, we'd shout and holler to wake up the residents. I bet they were pleased, Andrew. Who's that hoodlum outside my house, shouting and hollering? Finally, we had a result, where our host made chai, the lovely Kenyan tea. It is, isn't it? Now that, after you hollering at that door in the middle of the night, is proper Kenyan hospitality, I'd say, Andrew. In the morning, we set out again. We found that we'd, in fact, walked in a huge circle. Our hosts lived just outside off the edge of the picture. Not only that, but once at our destination, only then did Pastor David decide to tell us that where we buried the truck was actually proper bandit territory. A real baptism of fire for my first night in Kenya. I'm just breaking away for 2 seconds. I want to make a picture of this. Barney found it, to be fair. Barnes, come this way, come on. Look at this. My friend Mally Davis would, at this moment, be losing his whatsits over this. He really would. There's this glorious tree. It's almost, well, it's like an octopus with tentacles just firing out. I know, Barnes. I'm very excited. Would you let me talk? I'm very excited about this as well. You could get up my picture now if you like. Let me put my letters down. Hang on to those thoughts about Kenya land for a moment. Come over here, come on. Sorry to click my fingers at you, but I could do with a much wider lens than the 35 equivalent that I'm using. But that's what I've got, so that's what I'll use. But you'll get an idea. I'll put it on the show page today of the tentacles just firing out of the earth here. Look at this. I want to get the right angle. Hold on, step to the left a bit. A step to the left. What's that song? Right, 1/2/5, 3.6, ISO 160. Quite a lot of light in here. I'm just going to underexpose by a stop. And then step to the right. And look through what forms like, or looks like it's forming, a branch that's broken away that's forming an archway. There we go. Oh, I like that. I do apologise, I've broken away from your letter. Where were we? Yes. The reason for the trip was a 2-week mission to the Maasai people, sharing with them stories from the Bible. So we would share stories, we'd drink lots of chai, we'd visit schools, we'd perform dramas, and in the evenings we'd have film shows. The year before, during one particular film night, a proud young Maasai warrior was so incensed at one of the scenes of the crucifixion, he actually threw his spear right at the screen. If you're squeamish, by the way, look away now. These photographs I'm referencing are on the show page, but Andrew finishes his story with the following. The young lad in the picture that I've sent was sitting by a local watering hole, which was practically, well, really a muddy puddle, no more than 2 times 3 feet wide and only inches deep. This particular year was very bad for the Maasai. The drought forced wildlife nearer to towns than they'd been before. The animals would normally never visit this particular one, but because of the drought, they started to use it. For their own safety, people would only collect water from there later during the day when the temperature started to rise, and the animals, as they do, had retreated to find shade to cool down. One lady from the village, sadly and horrifically, was taken by lions. She'd travelled from her home, which is the dark horizontal line in the photo. Life is indeed tough for the Maasai. You know, I've been to Kenya, and I went on safari in Kenya. So I went on certainly a far more touristy route than the one that you took. Although, when you talked about the mud on the roads, we had a similar-ish experience. We were sharing a van that was going out to safari with, now I can always remember Della's name. I can't remember the chap's name. I think it was something like Keith or Clive. It was a K noise anyway. And it was our honeymoon. So we went to Kenya for our honeymoon. And I didn't take much photographic equipment with me. I took an Ixus. Do you remember those little Canon Ixuses? Tiny silver. Well, they were metal boxes. They were quite hardy cameras. A zoom inside, I think, as well. Just a slight... Where are you going, pups? This way? Come on. You're stuck in the brambles. I'm not going in there. Come on, I'm telling a story about Keith and Della. Oh, for heaven's sakes. Don't do that. I can't go into areas like that, like you can squeeze through those brambles. Anyway, yeah, we were travelling along this road and had my little Canon Ixus. We were heading off to safari. We were getting stuck in the mud as well. I thought, there's no way we're getting through. We're camping out tonight. Maybe I would have been hollering for chai that night. I don't know. But we started having a chat just to pass the time. And Keith and, I'm sure it was Keith and Della said, what do you do for a living then? Since we were out on safari, they brought their camera kit with the biggest zooms you could possibly imagine. And there was me with my little Canon Ixus. And I said, I'm a photographer. And the two of them looked at me in that, right, in his dreams way. Anyway, Andrew, thank you for your story. Pictures are on the show page today. A couple of weeks ago, we featured the music of Hans Johnson, whose own story with the Maasai I hope you found really captivating. It was certainly very emotional, wasn't it? It was unusual to have a musician as opposed to a photographer for an episode. Though the pictures he painted in our minds certainly, well, for me anyway, carried a real potency. And a deep emotion for the people of this extraordinary part of East Africa. So I'm sure you'll indulge one of our favourite pieces of music that we use often on the programme that features voices of the Maasai. This is music from Hans Johnson, and thank you, Andrew, for your story today. Squelch, squelch, squelch. I rather laboured my story last week of my lower boots, didn't I? There's a hole in my boots. Don't do the song again, Neil. We got the idea last time. Still haven't fixed it, so I'm out with my walking shoes. And I think that puddle rather swamped them. I need my boots back. Definitely need my boots. Pups looks like he's wearing boots. Look at your legs. Half of them are very dark brown from that mud now. Look at you, really. I got a bit of a marketing telling off the other day, so I need a bit of help, please, so I don't have to visit the headmaster's office of social media again. This is a sort of, well, I think it's a coffee, couple of Garibaldis and a few moments on the Apple-flavoured podcast app, which will be a walk in the proverbial park if that's the app of your choice. It really helps the show to be discovered if you leave a review on Apple Podcasts. To do that, just go to the Apple Podcasts app, search up the Photowalk, and then leave just a few words as a review. That way, the great podcast sphere recognises us more and suggests us to more people who might like to walk with you and I. Me with my camera, you with your camera, me with the letters as well. So if you could find a moment to do that, that would be really, really appreciated. We started out with a long letter today, so I think I'd like to introduce you to my guest, Michelle Valberg, now, who'll not be a stranger, as indeed neither of our guests are today. I did actually invite Michelle back because after talking to her about the fabulous adventures she makes, as well as the quiet times out on the lake, actually, as part of her photographic solace where she lives in Canada land. But she told me she was off on an adventure that took her to the Antarctic Peninsula. And I was intrigued to learn about her time on that particular adventure, what she saw and the photographic challenges that the extremes bring that you'll hear about today. Quote, Michelle has spent over 3 decades captivating audiences with her extraordinary storytelling through the lens. Throughout her work, Michelle's deep-rooted love for Canada and the Arctic shines through in her breathtaking imagery. Michelle holds the prestigious titles of Canadian Geographic Photographer in Residence, Fellow of the Royal Canadian Geographic Society, and International Fellow of the Explorers Club in New York. Wouldn't that be just the best club to belong to, eh? I can imagine jumping a cab. Where to, sir? I think just take me to 46 East 70th Street, the Explorers Club, would you? Really, sir? That sounds amazing. If only, though, the walls could talk in a Harry Potter-esque way, because you have portraits of former members like Amelia Earhart there, and Earhart. Do you pronounce it Earhart? I think you do. And Sir Edmund Hillary, and then the likes of explorers still with us like Buzz Aldrin, and now Michelle Valberg. So it's quite the honour, really, being a member of that club. You have to be a proper explorer, though. Not an influencer doing a tour of oat milk latte artisan coffee joints in search of the best blueberry muffin sold south of the equator. No. He says perhaps a little bit uncharitably, but with a glint in his eye. No, you have to be the sort of explorer that esteemed list certainly were and are. Anyway, here's part 1 of 2 chats today with returning guest Michelle Valberg.
Michelle, it's quite unusual that I get the privilege to talk to somebody twice in. I mean, it must be about 10 episodes since we last talked, or maybe a little bit less or a little bit more. But it's fantastic to have you along so soon.
Oh, so happy to be here. Well, you opened it up. You opened up the door when I was going away. You said, "Come back and tell us all."
I know. I did. It's on the program. It's there to hear, and I'm so glad you have. Because, I mean, you sent me, I said to Michelle, just so you know, I said, send me just a couple of bullet points of where you've been. And that's what I got back. More than a few bullet points. So
And what else? What else did I include?
Our pictures as well. Yeah. Yes. I have to say I was doing a bit of man looking a moment ago. I said to Michelle, it'd be great to have some pictures as well. And she said, they're at the bottom of the email. So that's what my wife calls man looking.
I love that. Can I use that?
Of course you can. I thought everybody used it. I mean, you've already said that your husband suffers from the same.
He does. But I've never used a man looking. I've used man cold before, but I've not used man looking.
No, I use it when I go into shops. If I can't find something, I always say, my wife would say, this is man looking. And it usually gets a laugh and some sympathy. So yeah,
what more? Sympathy or looks?
Maybe more looks than sympathy, probably. Yeah. You've welcome back, traveller. But when I say welcome back, you're just about to go away again tomorrow. Before we go with where you've been, where are you going tomorrow?
I am going to Vancouver Island, to the west coast of Vancouver Island, and we are going to photograph and document the herring spawn.
So, well, you're a little bit closer to home than you have been the last.
Yes, a little bit closer, but still a good 5.5-hour flight, and then a ferry ride, and then another 2-hour drive, and then another boat ride. So I don't know. It could be pretty close. Canada is so huge. So being or living in the central part, it takes quite a bit of effort to get to where we're going, which is on the far west coast of British Columbia and Canada. So so the herring spawn happens. It's usually over a month period. It's bigger than the salmon run. It brings in all kinds of critters, including the coastal wolves that we talked about on the last show. Orcas, gray whales, sea lions, sea otters, black bears come out of hibernation, eagles, and just an unbelievable amount of bird life. So lots of critters that feed on the herring run. And pretty remarkable place to go back to.
No spirit bears this time, though.
Not that I know of. No, there's no spirit bears on the island. No. But we'll see what else we can find.
Well, you've got plenty to photograph. God, I tell you, the glamour of wildlife photography. I'm looking at the list of what you've done. You spend a month in Antarctica. So we'll start with the Falklands, South Georgia and Antarctica Peninsula. The Falklands always looks to me like this sort of, now I know we have a Union flag flying above the Falklands, and there are some countries that find that less palatable. But I've always felt it's kind of one of these real outposts that's bitter and cold and such a difficult place to live.
Yeah, difficult to live for sure, I would say. But if you're in Albatross, it's a perfect place to live.
So that was what you were looking for.
We were looking for penguins. We went to Gypsy Cove just outside of Stanley, which is their capital. And we saw nesting cormorants, blue-eye shags. There was black-crowned night herons nesting. There were penguins, all kinds of birds. It was really quite remarkable.
Were there thousands and thousands of penguins? Is it that sort of you can't move for them?
No, there's not in the areas that we went to. I haven't been into the other parts of Falkland Islands to really talk about the thousands and thousands like they have in Antarctica or South Georgia. But for the Falklands where we were, the beach, beautiful. It looks like you're in the Caribbean. I mean, the beaches are extraordinary, and you've got penguins walking along, and it really is one of the most beautiful places. It can be not very welcoming if the wind's up, which it can be very much so. But yeah, it's an extraordinary place and in the middle of nowhere. So it takes quite an effort to get there.
And you were the photo coach, weren't you?
Yeah. So I was on the ship. I was working with Abercrombie and Kent, and I was the photo coach. So I teach, I do presentations, I have one-on-ones. I have screen shots that are up at Recap. I do the blog for them, and I produce a video at the end. So it is really crazy to be out there photographing all day, experiencing all this, being part of the team. You're called on for whatever reason, however you can help the passengers. And then you get back, you download and you know how the drill is you create all this content, and then you have about a nanosecond to download it before you're off to have lunch in order to get back to your room to redress. It really is a crazy time, and so intense as the wildlife is. I mean, it's full of drama and intensity.
So what were the highlights then? Because you went on trip 2, you went south of the Antarctic Circle. So Falklands, South Georgia, Antarctica Peninsula, and south of the Antarctic Circle. There must have been some highlights for you where you thought, this is living the dream here. I'm photographing what I want to be photographing.
Yeah, I had mentioned to you about the avian flu hitting South Georgia in particular, pretty bad. So we had a lot of limitations to what I have typically been used to in the past. You're able to get down on the ground, and you're able, as wildlife photographers, right, we like to get low to the subjects, not looking down at them. So we had all these limitations. We had huge biosecurity that we had to go through as well. We had to check everybody's, whatever they were wearing, from their boots to their pants to their Velcro to their tops, their jackets to their backpacks. Everything had to be vacuumed. It was quite remarkable what we had to go through. Sure. And then we weren't able to land in some of the places that we were supposed to originally. that we're targeting for landing. And that's because the seal population is being affected greatly. Some of the fur seals, elephant seals, we did see some that were dead in the water and on the surface, which was really devastating.
It's heartbreaking.
So they're not quite sure what's going to happen over the next little while, but certainly everybody's taking huge precautions to make sure that we don't worsen it. So I saw it kind of from a very different way because, like Gold Harbor, where we'd go and there's thousands and thousands of elephant seals and penguins all over the shoreline. And the sound, it's so deafening. All your senses just kind of come alive and are acute because you're smelling the guano and you're hearing the sound of like hundreds of thousands of penguins and elephant seals. And then you're seeing what you can't even describe when you're seeing that many animals in one place. We weren't able to land there, but we were able to go by Zodiac. And it was a really different scenario to look at this magnificent place that's blanketed by these towering, beautiful mountains and glaciers. And, the sky was so dramatic and everything. Yeah. And being able to photograph from that side and see the king penguins that were in the water and they were swimming together. Then the leopard seal comes into it, and then you're watching the leopard seal going after the penguins. And so it was a really, I found it absolutely fascinating to see it. I've been lucky enough though to have seen it from the land as well. But for everybody that was on our ship, anyone who was visiting with limitations to South Georgia this year, it is what it is. We do what the greater good, and we do well by these species, and you just kind of take what is given to you. But it was a really neat way to see it.
I mean, with the avian flu problems that you had when you were photographing, I think you mentioned to me you couldn't even crouch down. You could, when it came to changing lenses or anything from your camera bag, there's no way that's going down on the floor. You have to, you're on your feet.
You're on your feet. So, and typically because there's straps and everything, then I would go to a team member, and then they would hope I walk with a dry bag. And of course you're battling, some snowstorms, some sideways rain. I mean, the weather is all over the map. So now you're trying to change cameras, or, I wouldn't typically have two cameras out. I would carry the other one in my backpack. I'd have to go up to a team member and have them hold open my backpack so I could take it out. And then, readjust it, re-put it back on your back, all while nothing's touching the ground at all. Yeah. And crouching, you couldn't even just bend. It was insane. Yeah.
There were some highlights. A pod of 25 or so orcas that you saw. That must have been fantastic.
Oh, it was amazing. That was in south of the circle. We watched them, and they were circling all around. They weren't, there was a large kind of family grouping together, but they were kind of circling our ship. And then we came across a seal. Poor guy. He was sitting on the ice, like a little ice pan. Right. And, we were watching it. We were thinking for sure this was it. I mean, the demise of this seal. They've got 25 orcas. It's on a small ice pan. We've all seen those videos, or most of it, those videos where they just come up and they crash and they take the seal, but they left it. So they never went after it, which was quite fascinating. We were all bracing ourselves for this potentially horrendous looking scene that was unfolding. But of course, the magic of nature, we were preparing for it, but it never happened.
You never know. I mean, that picture we'll share on the show page. I would imagine it's a very quiet scene, isn't it?
Very quiet, but deafening as well. So you have these, when you're amongst the icebergs, or you're in your Zodiac and you stop and, you're just floating. You're hearing the sound of the ice crackling in the water. Maybe you might hear the sound of an iceberg calving. You hear the sound of a faint sound, maybe of the colony of the penguins. It goes from moments of pure silence and wonder to just this amazing sound that is just singing in your ears.
Because I do tend to think, I'm thinking, well, the icebergs will be absolutely silent, but of course they're not, are they? They're constantly moving.
And calving, we saw a couple of calving, which, then just echoes through wherever you are. It sounds so loud, and it can be forceful, but it can be a small little berg that is making noise, and it just reverberates and just goes through, and you feel it through you too. Yeah. I think that's the other thing, your senses are so alive. It's almost like things come through you, you feel it resonates through you.
What did you see?
Iceberg, dead ahead, sir.
Iceberg dead ahead, sir.
Out of starboard, sir.
You see, as we said at the start, oft misquoted, that was a clip from A Night to Remember from 1958. The scene in the movie, the black and white movie, when Titanic's crow's nest first spies the massive iceberg. And this sound, well, this is the roaring of calving when small to medium to huge sections of ice break off a glacier, caused often by the forward motion of a glacier creating instability. And what comes off the glacier is known to us as an iceberg. In the last weeks of March 2000, iceberg B-15 calved from the Ross Ice Shelf near Roosevelt Island, Antarctica. It was widely quoted as being the size of Jamaica. Scientists believe that the enormous piece of ice broke away as part of a long-term natural cycle. This happens every 50 to roughly 100 years. Remember Jill Heineth from episode 415? Well, Jill and her team decided they would become the first ever to cave dive inside an iceberg, and that iceberg was part of B-15. A story which could have ended in tragedy. I'll let you revisit or first-time visit that episode, which I'll link to on the show page. Calving is an important process of mass loss for the world's ice sheets, estimated to be responsible for a third of present-day mass loss from Greenland's ice sheet alone. Anyway, some calving facts for you. Let's return to my conversation with Michelle. The humpbacks feeding beside the Zodiac.
Oh. Talk about resonating through you.
Yeah.
Come out of the water and they breathe and they trumpet and it's so magnificent and amazing to watch them feed. There were two of them and then they would just come up. It was gentle feeding. It wasn't bubble net.
Right.
But you could see them.
Sorry, what wasn't what? Sorry?
Oh, bubble net feeding. When the humpback bubble net feed.
Right.
Sometimes they can do it with one, sometimes with two, sometimes in greater, but they create this bubble that traps the krill, and then they just come out with their wide open mouths and just big gulps of the krill. Yeah. So they were feeding, you could tell, but it was so full of food where we were that they weren't having to work that hard at it. But it was just every time they surfaced and came up, it was just this incredible dance and sound.
Your friend Jill Heineth, who we spoke to the week after you, actually. Yeah. So it was great to have both of you on in succession. She was telling us about, and you've reminded me actually with the iceberg just a moment ago, telling us about swimming into the iceberg. And then, because I'd always naturally thought, and I asked this question, I didn't think it was a daft question. I did ask at dinner time with the kids and my wife. I was fearful of the answer, but they said the same as me. I said, what do you think's in an iceberg? And they said, well, it's just a big lump of ice, isn't it? Just floating in the water. I can't imagine there's anything in there. Jill, she went inside this huge berg, and only hours later it imploded. She would have been in it.
Yeah.
I mean, that's when you say they make noise. For a moment, I was thinking, well, they must be quite quiet. But of course, no, because she encountered the absolute opposite. Opposite.
Can you imagine? I've seen her talk, and every time I watch her, every time I hear that story, I just, I know. You take a deep breath, and she's remarkable. She's absolutely a remarkable human being, what she's done.
You're not tempted to
No. I don't even finish that question. No, diving no into it.
You two are friends. I thought maybe you could share that experience.
Yeah, no. I have swam with humpback whales though in warm water.
Yeah.
But no, diving into icebergs, that's a whole different ball game.
When you're swimming with whales and photographing them as you do as a wildlife photographer, what is that? I mean, people talk about that being a tearful experience, which I can well imagine, unlike anything that they've ever experienced before. Try and, if you can, try and explain what that feeling is like.
Humbling.
Yeah.
Yeah. When you're seeing them, I think that's what gives me such a greater appreciation too, when I see the humpbacks on the surface, knowing and having experienced them underwater, to see that and their movements and to see their gracefulness and their beauty underwater. Yeah, to be that close to them too, to look eye to eye with a humpback whale underwater or a narwhal. I've done that too. I don't know. I find this all really hard to explain, as you can tell.
Yeah.
You just, when you're amongst this kind of natural wonder and beauty, I always find myself privileged. I guess that's why I say humbled, probably, because I there's never a moment that no matter what animal it is, really, because they're allowing you to be part of their world.
This might sound a strange question, but I'm kind of thinking about the photojournalists I talk to, who talk along, I suppose, a similar channel when they're talking about the humbling experience of being with people. And they often put their cameras down. They become a person first, photographer second, because they need to spend time with the people that they're photographing. And I would imagine that's the same with you. Or is that kind of, I've got to get this shot, I'm never going to get this close to a humpback whale again?
Yeah, I think it's opposite, because I've photographed a lot of people. I've done portraits my whole career. So I understand that importance of communication and connection with your subject, for sure. When you're in the wildlife world, you don't know exactly what you said. You don't know what's going to happen. You don't know how much time you're going to have. So you have to kind of seize the moment while you can, because that fleeting moment can be gone. It could be in your mind, which has happened many times when things have happened and you've chosen to not take a photo, or you weren't ready, or the settings were wrong, or whatever. It became something that lives in your brain and your heart. But yeah, with wildlife, it's very different that way. And it's an interesting perspective to say that, because you want to feel connected to that animal. But I think that comes from looking through the viewfinder, maybe looking through a longer lens, seeing their eyes, capturing the moment, and then being able, if you are, to put your camera down and try to have that connection without that lens in front of you or between you and the animal. I never feel that I am missing anything by looking through my camera, because I'm seeing it in such a different light. I'm seeing it in such a different way that it's like my own unique vision of this beautiful creature. And if you're shooting with a long lens, oftentimes you are, with wildlife, 600, 800, then you have a whole different perspective than you would with, say, a normal lens or a portrait lens. Every experience that we have, I think it makes you're the sum total of all these amazing experiences. And I think as wildlife photographers, the more, whether it's the critters in your backyard or wherever that you photograph, every time that you have an experience like that, it just makes you a better photographer.
And Michelle Valberg returns shortly with part 2 of her story. I love this part of Greenham Common, the airbase where I so often walk with you and Barney, as it is today, with our cameras making a photo walk. This is a slightly more industrial part, although there's lots of silver birch that have been planted here to kind of separate the industrial bit, which you'll start to hear whirring in a moment as a backdrop to this piece. But we're at the part of what was the airfield, the former airfield, which is where the fire service had a test aircraft that they'd set alight. It's not actually a real old aircraft. It's one made out of sheets of steel, I think, that they would set alight and practice firefighting. And there's also a little some sort of fire building outhouse here. I think maybe that was what controlled the gas that flowed to the aircraft that they used to douse with whatever it is that the airport firefighters use to put out extraordinary blazes. I'll get a photograph of that in a second as I walk by. If you'd like to send in your pictures to the show and your stories, your thoughts, your contributions, then I'd love to hear from you. The email address is stories@photowalk.show. stories@photowalk.show. If you're sending pictures, it is handy if you can resize them to 2,500 pixels wide. That really helps, because that's the size that we pop onto the show page itself. If you don't know how to do that or can't, don't worry, I will do the heavy lifting, as I say, for you. And I will make a picture of this building now, which is sort of, it's not quite consumed by vegetation. And I don't go too far into here, Barnes, because there's loads of brambles. But actually, from this angle, it looks like is being taken back gradually by the trees and the bushes and the brambles. Let's get a picture here. There we go. Oh, I wish on this X100V, which I'm using today, there was a way to actually lock the exposure on the top plate, where you can choose exposure compensation and do it by winding in +3 or -3. It often moves. I wish there was a lock for that. I do. And that lock didn't appear on the new one, the X100 either. It's not there. Let's head down into the woodland a bit here, pups, because might give us a bit of a respite from the wind. It's quite a biting wind, actually. Right. Here's a letter from Robbie Summers. Another longish one, but I'm sure you'll indulge, as there are some moments you may well recognise from your own creative life coming up. Neil, I can't tell you, says Robbie, how many times I've mentally written this letter to the show, but always found a reason to talk myself out of it. I've listened to the podcast for longer than I care to admit, but I'm grateful for what you create and the inspiration that it brings to get me out with my camera. Well, thank you. I'm grateful for you being there. I know you're not one for flattery with your sensibilities. You're right. And it's not one of those, tell me more about how much you love me kind of sensibilities. It's a genuine one. And I'm not eloquent enough to convey what I've felt through listening to the interviews with the guests you have on the show. I do, however, want you to know that I've laughed out loud and shed genuine tears listening to some of your guests. I particularly enjoy your conversations with photojournalists, humanitarian and conflict photographers. I feel a bit of a connection through my work as a paramedic, both in a civilian and military capacity. Some of the stories they tell must have a heavy burden to carry. They certainly do. That's very true. I have to say the main reason I haven't contributed a letter is down to the all too familiar friend or foe of the show, imposter syndrome. I don't know what the necessary qualifications are to be called a photographer, and I've considered myself at most an enthusiastic amateur, if I was to attribute any sort of label to it at all. It wasn't until somebody introduced me to another person as a photographer that I stopped and realised that, that's exactly what I am, and I was caught off guard by a sense of achievement, almost as if I'd made it. I'm putting some effort into overcoming these feelings this year, and in part that's why I'm finally writing this letter to you. You know, Robbie, one of the first things I was told in my life as a creative was to make a business card. And the creativity that I'm talking about, or the creative endeavour that I had at the time, was back in my days wanting to become a radio presenter. Somebody told me, make a business card that says radio presenter. And that's what I did. I went down to the stationers in my town. This is a trip back down memory lane, it really is. It was a stationers called Creasy's. Been there donkey's years. They're not anymore, unfortunately. One of those businesses that found that stationers, traditional stationers, was not the way of the future. Anyway, it was called Creasy's, and they produced my first business card. It said radio presenter. I'm not sure that it made me a radio presenter, but I think I felt a bit more like a radio presenter. and the advice, well, it paid off, because that's what I became. Did I feel any more of a radio presenter because it was on a business card? Do you know what, Robbie? I think for one moment, I think I did. Anyway, back to the letter. I first became interested in photography through my great uncle, who was a priest and missionary in South America. It's almost a theme today. He would return from his trips with packs of slide film full of photos of adventures in exotic places, often out of focus, or with a thumb blocking out half the frame, and project slideshows onto the wall of my grand's living room. I used to play with the empty camera and shoot imaginary frames of my brothers, winding the advance lever, clacking away on the shutter. I suspect the camera probably wasn't always empty, and there may have been some blurry and out-of-focus photographs of my own. Unfortunately, Uncle Jimmy suddenly passed away when I was 13, and before I could appreciate his influence, really, I can only hope that if he was still alive, that I would have valued his mentorship. I probably could use it now. I didn't seriously photograph anything until the opportunity came for an adventure of my own, and I found myself overseas working in Nepal. I was there with my tiny Sony Cybershot. Was it a bit like my Canon Ixus, Robbie? Anyway, I was there with my Cybershot on loan from my mum before my girlfriend, now wife, came to visit and gifted me a Canon bridge camera. It never left my side, and the bug hit hard. Fantastic. This is the best story. A show in Grand's living room, leading to a photographic life emerging. It really is. I told my family about how I often thought of Uncle Jimmy in the slideshows when we were children, and how I'd love to have had his camera after he died. And my Gran, well, she looked at me and said, "Well, you can have it. It's been sitting here on top of the wardrobe for years." And sure enough, there it was, with a roll of film still inside. And on developing it, photographs of me and my brothers at a family celebration almost 15 years earlier. That's a fantastic story. This year I plan to create a series of projects. Short-term, concentrated efforts with a view to print a series of photos that are in some way connected, telling a story, to use the cliche. The first project I completed started out by accident. As a paramedic, working in a particularly busy city, I felt that something wasn't adding up when the pandemic hit. There was a big difference between what I would see on the news at home and what I was experiencing at work. And I saw the opportunity, even felt a duty, to document what my colleagues and I were going through at the time. The Corona Cruise is the project that was born out of it. It initially started as something intensely private, but there was no way I could keep it to myself. Due to the nature of the work that we do, there are seldom appropriate times to take a good photograph of each other doing the job, and I set out to make as many portraits and journalistic photographs of my colleagues as I possibly could. In the end, I made a photo book, and the sole copy is permanently in place in our ambulance station in commemoration of the courage shown at such a challenging time, along with giving prints to those in the photographs. I'm fiercely proud to have been able to give my colleagues prints of the portraits made, and I know that they take pride of place in their homes or those of their families. I've included some of the images from the Corona Cruise, and I think I'm finally ready to share some of these projects with the wider world as I go forward. By making things public, well, you do open yourself up to criticism. And part of my reluctance to share some of the work I care about comes from this, who am I to put this out there? I'm not a photographer. Imposter mentality. I use Instagram as a bit of a digital placeholder for my photos, and I've been there. It's at Robbie Summertime. I like what you've done with the name. I will put it on the show page so others can follow it. But I'm putting your other pictures on the of the photojournalistic documentary in terms of your work, the work that you did as a paramedic. I'm going to put those on the show page today, so thank you so much for those. They are extraordinary. They are. And you live in a beautiful part of the world. I get a real gauge of how important the peace and the escapism, if sometimes only fleeting, that you have with your camera, because it absolutely shines through in the pictures, and in particular the one of the old pier. This long exposure picture, like a mist. The water forms this sort of mist devouring the landing platform. You'll have to go and have a look on Robbie's Instagram. Right, let's spend a few minutes with our regular monthly guest, Valérie Jardin, who joins us this year to talk about making projects. And it seems a very timely moment to hear from Valérie, since we're talking about projects. And we're doing that today, looking at Valérie's own work, and a particular project that's called On Ice, which I think dovetails well with the theme of today's program as well. So here's Valérie talking about the project On Ice, and actually revisiting a project that we talked about only a couple of months ago as well. Valérie Jardin,
Valérie, sort of dovetailing our conversation really into my chat with Michelle this week, because we're talking about the cold. But before we talk about the cold, let's talk about the heat. Madrid. You've got another workshop coming up in Madrid. It was another one of those ones where I think you were kindly going to say, come to Madrid, Neil. And I was about to say, Valérie, I would love to. And I looked in the diary and realised I'd be in the cold in Austria. But Madrid is coming up. Tell me all about it and make me feel jealous.
Yeah, it's actually a 5-day street photography workshop in Madrid, April 6th through the 10th, with a side trip to the city of Toledo. I'm really excited, and I've been learning Spanish, so and I just got back from teaching in Oaxaca, Mexico. So I'm going to be in full immersion again. So yeah, and actually I mentioned it to you before we hit the record button because a spot just opened up. So if you can't take it, maybe someone out there can. So reach out to me.
Valérie, ¿cómo está?
Muy bien, muy bien.
Right, and the other one I really want to mention, now we have a payoff, or it's called a payoff, radio term, on the Extra Mile show. And I always say at the end of it, I've always felt, and I said it on many of my radio shows for many, many years, because I felt that it was like I felt like people, Valérie, had turned up to my counselling session. In other words, that's what a radio show felt like to me, that I could say what I like, just unload everything. And then at the end of the show, I used to say, thank you for listening. I feel so much better now. And I've taken that into the Extra Mile, which I use. But this is the best payoff, and it comes from one of your centenarians.
So it has been the most incredible journey.
Yep.
This project is actually called 1 Century, Portraits of Centenarians. That's right. And the activities that bring them joy. It's about them now, not them in the past.
Yeah.
And yes, it's going really well. I started it in November. The goal was 12 centenarians by September 2024, and I reached 12 by February. So way ahead. I have 2 more lined up.
Yeah.
And I'm putting them in the gallery on the website under the 1 Century gallery in my portfolio as I go. There are a couple exhibits planned, a book later this year. It's just been such a journey and meeting such extraordinary people. Just photographed a 108-year-old woman who still plays the piano, and I'm meeting a 107-year-old gentleman in the next couple weeks who still lives in his home, drives his car, cleans his house, does his grocery shopping, cooks for himself, and a lot of World War II veterans. So several of the people I photographed are going to travel to Normandy for the 80th anniversary.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Why did you start to do that project? What was the reason?
Just a challenge. I had thought about people 90 and up, and I thought, now there's so many of them that I won't have the challenge of picking 100 and up. And there was something about 100, 1 century. Yeah. I started pretty strong with a woman who swims for an hour every day. And I photographed her at the pool. It was really wonderful way to start the project. I remember
talking about it, yeah.
Yeah, but then it started getting more and more difficult, trying to reach out to them. Often you have to go through the children or the grandchildren, right?
Yeah.
And sometimes they're overprotective and they say no without consulting the centenarian, who every time is having the time of their life.
Give them the chance to make their own answer.
Exactly. Yeah. And they are so happy. They're happy for the attention. They're happy for the company, meeting someone new. I've revisited some of them 2-3 times already. Yeah. And it's just such a wonderful opportunity. So now it's snowballing because the word is out. There is the 80th anniversary of D-Day, and there are a lot of centenarians in the United States who landed at Omaha Beach, and I have photographed a few of them. And so now it's almost more than I can
right, it's been
photograph,
an
which is
amazing
great.
project. So come on, tell me this lovely payoff. I think it was the 107-year-old chap, isn't it?
Yes. So I haven't met him yet. He lives in Wisconsin. I just can't wait. I'm going to be talking to him this week on the phone, and then we'll make a plan. So he's 107. I talked with his daughter, and she said his favorite line is when he says goodbye to people, he tells them, "Have a good day, unless you have other plans." And I thought that says so much about his personality. And so that's
I love that.
That's one of my upcoming shoots. So we'll have to feature some of those photographs and have a
proper update on the project.
Yeah.
Right. Well, this week we're talking about On Ice. And actually the On Ice project, this year with you, we've decided to take a project. There's many. We're not going to run out. We're going to take a project a month and try and get under the hood, as it were, about the project, why you did it, what you found, what sort of photographs and people that you encountered. And this plays a lot, actually, Valérie, into us talking so often about the magic of photography, being that there's often stuff on your doorstep. It does, however, fall during a period, and I still find it hard to say the word COVID and pandemic, but it does fall during the pandemic. But actually, that's a kind of it's not so much a side story, but this could still happen. This project could still be made now. It's not, I mean, you happen to be making it in the pandemic, because I think you went out and found that there was a world of ice out there on your doorstep that revealed lots of amazing things.
Absolutely. And I think projects often start because you're in an unusual situation and you're going to make the best of it. And that's exactly what happened. That was the first winter of the pandemic. I normally travel a lot, and of course I didn't travel as much, although I didn't have the restrictions that many had because of my my French citizenship and my U.S. residency. I had special travel privileges. But yes, like everybody else, it's like all of a sudden your world shrinks. And Minnesota is a really harsh place to live in. It's the place of extremes. And so winters can be extremely, extremely tough for months. Often we have 6 months of snow. I mean, this year really is an exception. We're talking about that as I have the window open in my office in March. But normally we're thawing from feet and feet of snow at this time of the year. And the lakes are still solid and you can still drive across a lake or a river. So it is a really unique place for nature and nature lovers. And here I am, a street photographer in this tundra. So the streets in Minnesota in the winter in general are pretty boring, but life on the frozen lakes and frozen rivers was quite vibrant. So it became a fun adventure, a game. I met so many people. It felt like I was hunting for treasures in a way, because it was about finding new activities on ice that I would have never imagined.
I know with a lot of your street photography, it's making photographs of candid moments that are unexpected. Here you had a chance, it appears to me, to converse and to communicate with people. Did you enjoy that? Was that?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, you can't really be discreet and hide on a frozen lake, right? It's not like I was going to hide behind a tree anyway. I had to get close. I was shooting at 23 and my camera actually froze a few times on me. I was out on some extreme cold temperatures. And of course, yes, I would come close to people who were playing tennis on ice or swimming in a hole in the ice. And so, of course, they knew I was photographing them. I didn't ask permission. I didn't, I would do the same as I would do on the street. I would just go and photograph. But often it led to conversation. We'd often share Instagram, share the pictures whenever possible. Absolutely, yeah.
Small details are really so precious in photographs. And there's one here, Four Seasons Restaurant, delivering to fishermen here. And beyond the sign, you look out onto what is quite a large lake, actually.
Yeah, that's the lake I go almost every day near my home.
Right, and there's fishermen sort of spread across this lake. You wouldn't have thought that's an area where people deliver, you phone out for food.
Oh yeah, you can get your pizza delivered on the ice.
I love the ones of the husky. Pulling the pram. That's fantastic. Yes. So
I mean, you see so many different things, funny moments. There's a lot of humor. I kind of a little bit like at the beach, actually. Yeah. I think people let their guards off, and it was really the place where you'd see people without mask at the time, and kind of it felt normal, just like being at the beach felt more normal than being on the streets in those days.
Were you tempted to take the plunge in the cold water immersion hole that You photograph?
No. They do that almost every day. And I've
they?
actually since then met them several times. Those are pretty much everywhere. It's hard when it's 40 below zero to keep that whole. I mean, every day they have to go and break the ice and to maintain it because it's frozen several feet deep. So you have to keep breaking the ice every day to maintain it. But it's actually funny because after they came out, I wanted to give them the pictures. And so I actually said, "Oh, do you want to just take my Instagram on your phone because my fingers are kind of cold?" I had mittens on. They were in the frozen lake. And granted, the water was warmer than the air, but it was kind of crazy because I was just freezing. And I wear special gloves. I have mittens. I have those little packs that if you shake them, they create heat for a couple of hours. I have that. I have liners. So I was in comfort compared to them.
One of the hardest things about this particular project, and you'll see it, I'll put a link on the show page, must be that you are photographing and it's across a lake. There's no, as you say, no trees to hide behind. There's nothing to sometimes put foreground, midground, background detail in your pit. None of that exists.
Well, it's about shooting from different perspectives, trying to find whatever foreground element that you can find. It could be just some snow on the ice in the foreground, or a leaf that happened to blow on the lake. Whatever it was, just trying to find different ways of seeing so that it wasn't so repetitive and everything shot at eye level. So just like you would on the street. So really, I applied the same skills and the same strategies that I do for all my photography projects.
I'm a kind of collector of projects, and I have a few main ones on the go always, visually and audibly. And I guess actually this podcast in all respects started out as a project, but that's the great thing about projects, so they can breathe and find form and shape in different ways as you make more work. I know, Valérie, this was really born from that period of masked history, but I dare say there's more pictures yet to be added here.
Eventually, I'll add to the project when we have a normal winter again, which is not this year. I'm glad I didn't decide to do this project this year because I think the ice fishermen were on the ice for less than a month this year. So, but I'll eventually add to it whenever I see something I haven't seen before. Yeah.
I tell you, this would have been fantastic in the mist of yesterday. Not that I would have found my way through it. I think I'd have been lost in this woodland. Lots and lots of birch. Can you imagine this yesterday, Barnes, as we were walking out in the mist? Oh, it would have been fabulous. It really would. Let me get a photograph, like a valley of these birch in front of me. A little sketchbooker with one sort of that's recently fallen across the path. 680 shutter, 3.6, 160 ISO. There we go. Oh. Barnes walked straight into shot. Barney, there we go. If you're gonna, let's get a picture of the front of you rather than the back end. Right, it's the Photowalk show. I'd like to do a couple of mentions, actually, for friends of the show, for exhibitions that they've got in different parts of the world. These are very important steps for them, for them both. Firstly, for one of our extra milers, Kieran Beard, who has his first ever exhibition in Geneva next week. Obviously, I know with listening patterns, you may get to this post the actual exhibition itself, but I'm sure you'll be sending photographic love all the same through the ether, the podcast sphere. So yes, Kieran's exhibition shows almost 20 street photography, or beautiful black and whites that he's made. And let me tell you, he has quite the eye. It's a special event, 14th of March, 1800 to 2000 hours, sharp, in Spaces, Geneva, right near the United Nations building, actually. I know if I say the address, you may not note it down in time, so follow the link in the podcast app to today's show page, episode number 423, and you'll find all the details there. Plus. I've invited Kieran to talk about the process of hosting an exhibition, and I'll share my own experiences of doing one myself on today's episode of The Extra Mile, which is, since the numbers correspond now together, Extra Mile, episode number 423. And then Hannah Gimblett, who is a reasonably regular contributor to this show, is part of an exhibition I'd like to tell you about. Now, this one is in the UK. Now, Hannah, just for reference, let's go this way, pups. Come on, we're going this way. Well, she's found it hard for a number of physical and neurological conditions to escape her house to make photographs for a long, long time now. And there are times that she's had to think completely outside the box in terms of how to make photographs. It can be a debilitating or very tiring process for Hannah, actually, making pictures. So this exhibition is very special. It's titled Silver and Light, an analogue photographic exhibition. It'll take place at Camwood Gallery, which is in Hereford. I know, I'm very excited too. And it's going to be between 4th of April and the 28th of April. So unlike Kieran's, which is a special one-night-only affair, this one's on for a little while. The exhibition will involve 29 talented analogue photographers showcasing a diverse range of subjects, styles and techniques. Silver and Light is a celebration of the timeless allure of photographic processes. I have no idea why I did that with some pseudo-French accent. But there we go. Again, I'll leave details on the show page for those who live in those areas. And the reason for mentioning this one is for the support being given to Hannah and her work, and the fact that Hannah is going to send us her experiences of being part of this as a separate letter in the weeks to come. I'm looking forward to that. It's a big, wide world out there, and I appreciate there are exhibitions all over the world. But it's nice to support you and your work because as much as, well, the dates come and go, I know, and people listen to these episodes in the months and even the year to come. But I hope this, I suppose, what I'm hoping is that it encourages you to think of your own projects that you may be working on, that they too may deserve place or places on a wall. Right, the assignment this month. Now, it should have by now its own page on the website. I've started to get some for it, and I think this is a cracking one this month, I really do. It was set last week, actually, by my guest, Christopher Herwig. It's the latest in our single-word challenges.
The Photowalk assignment.
This year, our assignments have taken on a different form. They are one-word assignments. So we'll give you a word, interpret that word, and then take it out and make a photograph. Christopher, I think you're very well placed to set a one-word assignment for this month. What will that word be?
I've chose the word overlooked.
I like it.
And yeah, I think, just to give a little explanation, I think there's so many times that as photographers, we either go out on an assignment or we go looking for photographs, and we want to have some ideas. We want to have done some homework. We have some preconceived notions of what we're going to photograph.
Yeah.
We go out and there's things that we would just never photograph. And those are kind of the things that just become overlooked, and they, for various reasons. To try and find value and meaning out of some of these objects or people, I think for me, has been an incredible experience as a photographer. And it not only, challenges your creative ability in terms of making these overlooked items exciting, but it also, there's a storytelling aspect about it. It's this sort of these unsung heroes, these underdogs, whether it's a person, whether it's an object, whether it's a place. Yeah.
Overlooked. I like it.
Okay.
My thanks to Christopher for setting this month's assignment. I think these one-word assignments, I know we've only had two, and one of those stretched across 2 months, but I think it's a good idea, and I really like this one that Christopher has set. I do. We're approaching a part of the airbase. I've made some photographs. I'll share them on the show page today, where it's a sort of it was kind of the mission control of this former nuclear-armed airbase. And I only recently learned from somebody who I met on a dog walk, funnily enough, it's funny the conversations you get into, and it wasn't around here actually, that the armory it's this very dull looking building just a big rectangle of concrete, as it were. The armory was actually where the air traffic controller or controllers sat. There is an air traffic control tower, very decent looking air traffic control tower. The building that I had my eyes on for years, it was, if I won the lottery big time, because it was just laying abandoned for years, but I could see the potential of this place as a house and a studio. But alas, it wasn't to be mine. It's now it's sometimes a gallery, and it's a good viewing area. And they have photo exhibitions there from time to time as well. And but it was never the air traffic control tower to be used in the event of anything horrible happening. It was they'd all be safely in a bunker controlling their aircraft from in there, because of course it makes sense, doesn't it? That's the first thing that's usually attacked at an airfield, isn't it? The air traffic control tower, as well as the runway itself. Anyway, where were we? I've completely lost my train of thought. Oh yes, I wanted to invite you to contribute. If you'd like to send in a letter of your journey, your adventures, your projects, your pictures of where you've been, then I'd love to hear from you. Send them to stories@photowalk.show. Stories@photowalk.show. If you are sending pictures, he says almost musically now, please send them as 2,500 pixels wide if you can. If you can't, I will do the heavy lifting. Are you right, Neil? Have you been at the mushrooms? No, I haven't been at the mushrooms. It's a packed show today of different voices and stories, and I would like to rejoin Michelle Valberg now for the second part of our conversation. The Explorer with a Camera, part 2 of my chat with Michelle Valberg.
Let's talk about the albatross and the giant petrels flying behind the ship. That must have been an incredible sight. Were they just following you?
They were following the ship,
keeping tabs on you?
They were not where they were supposed to be. And I had done a presentation for the passengers, and then I said, okay, I'm going to have a little photo lab up in the lounge. So anyone who has camera questions or whatever, we can do it more intimately there. So everybody followed up, and I had probably 12 or 14 people that were sitting around. And every once in a while, I would see somebody walk by, like one of the team members that didn't typically take photos, walk by with their camera, and they would go out to the back deck. And then I wouldn't see them come back. I'm like, okay, there's another one. And then finally Pete went by, and I said, what are you going out for? And he said, oh, there's all kinds of albatross following the ship. I'm like, what? What? And I'm sitting here talking to people about their cameras. We should be out there using them. And we went to the back, and it was all like light mantled, and we had wandering royal. We had black-browed, we had gray-headed, and and giant petrels. They were just flying everywhere. They were just everywhere. It was unbelievable. And then I had never seen that before, but I've only been 8 times. Compared to the rest of my team, I'm a real newbie. I mean, they've been going into these areas for 30 plus years, and they had never seen anything like it either.
What do you think the behavior was?
Well, it wasn't the behavior as much as what was happening, like where the location we were. Yeah. We were way too far south, or not, I shouldn't say way too far south, but we were south of where they typically are seen. And even the ornithologists, they were just like, that was just the most unbelievable thing we've ever seen.
This expedition team you travel with, naturalists, geologists, storyteller, ornithologist, mammal expert, as you say, really, really smart people and passionate about the polar region. What a fantastic team to travel with. Do you feel you learn as much from them as they learn from you? Oh,
I learned so much from them. When you think about you traveling to these faraway places, and then it's come alive even more so because you're being told about the animals, about their behavior, about conservation. Our ornithologist is married to our expedition leader, and together they're both ornithologists, but they did their PhD down in Antarctica, and they talk about the fishing lines and the albatross and the difficulties that are happening. the behavior of the mammals that Hallow was talking about, to understanding the rocks and the formations and the mountains and the glaciers and climate change. Big talks about climate change. And then Rob, who's a storyteller and historian, he's more of a storyteller than he is a historian, but it's all about Shackleton and the explorers and what they went through. And, we're all suffering out there in our lined jackets and waterproof everything and every layer imaginable. And then, he puts it into perspective how they explored so many years ago. So it's a wonderful way to not only experience where you're visiting, but it's awesome to be able to learn from these extraordinary humans that are part of your team.
Well, I want to go through some of the photographs now then. So these will be on the show page. So it's a good opportunity for you, because I like it if somebody's reading the show page and they hear a story about a particular picture and they can follow it along. I love the picture of the elephant seal just poking over his mate here. Just staring straight at you and that kind of...
Yeah, with the tongue out. Yeah. I think it reminds me of my dog, actually.
There is a little bit of dog about this chap,
yeah,
isn't there? He's got that, so what do you want? What's your problem?
And there's just oodles of room for them. They're like walrus. They're just oodles of room, but they're so tactile, and they fight with each other, and they, argue, and they fight, and they argue, and then they flop on each other, and then they sleep all together, and they're all huddled, and they all have such character, each one of them.
How close can you get to an elephant seal?
Well, you certainly don't want to be in the path of one, and there's all these regulations. So, IATO is the governance. So there's definite restrictions as far as how far that you can be from and approach these animals. With the penguins, it's not as easy because they approach you. It's hard to stay within the 25 yards, or I can't remember what it is. I get mixed up with the yards and the meters because I'm in meters like you. But so it's not always possible to stay the distance that you're supposed to, especially when they come into you. But
so you're backing off as they're coming towards you. So stay where you are, and they keep coming towards you. But look at these beautiful penguin chicks.
Are they adorable?
Yeah.
They are so adorable. And one of the best things about going in January is that you're able to see you're seeing the chicks. I saw one at the early part of January. I saw it actually breaking the eggshell, which was super cool. And then by the end that you're seeing them, they grow like just a huge amount in a short period of time. So you're seeing them as they get bigger and bigger, but they have a hard life too, right? And I gave you the skua photo with the penguin egg. I think the bird in flight. Do you see what it has in its mouth?
Oh, it's an egg. It's a penguin egg.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, I know. But they have very adorable chicks too.
Yeah.
So you're seeing this life, and then every time the skua flies over, you're like, no, don't.
But that's the thing about wildlife photography, isn't it? That's the thing I've always been fascinated about with when I'm watching Attenborough. Life is happening in front of you. And had those orcas attacked the seal, was a seal, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was a seal.
Then it would have just been happening in front of you as nature has intended it.
Absolutely, as it does when you're on safari or you're watching a hunt. But I have a hard time.
Is it still tough? Is it? Yeah. Iceberg art. You called it iceberg art. There's a beautiful picture of an iceberg with just the most. Is that sunset or sunrise?
It was sunset, I believe. The sunset. One that I sent you. Yeah.
I mean,
beautiful light. I mean, you're in the solstice down there, right? So, you're getting some pretty magnificent sunrises or sunsets when there's not much darkness, so when the sun does peak down a little bit, it just produces these magnificent colors of purples, and pinks, and oranges, and pretty dramatic. Everything's dramatic there.
Does it still surprise you?
Yeah, I'm left in awe every time I'm seeing it. Yeah. I guess you have that ability to go, okay, I've stood, where there's 250,000 pairs of king penguins, and I understand what that kind of feels like. But every time that we experience somewhere that we have been before, it's always different. It's never the same. I'm always left marveled. That's for sure. Yeah, it's an extraordinary place and mostly untouched.
This next picture, which will be on the show page with the others, as I say, did you actually go in the water with the leopard seal? It's an extraordinary picture.
No, I did not. No, I did not.
How do we have this picture then?
So a GoPro on a very long stick.
Okay.
No, I was not getting in any water. Thank you very much. So we had this leopard seal that was kind of playing around our zodiacs, and it was a she, I understand, and she had this most magnificent iceberg and beautiful, beautiful turquoisey color underneath. As you know, Jill talked to you about what goes under the surface as well, and it was like she was guarding her little territory. So it made for this beautiful background, and it was all just by chance, right? You're putting it down and you're like, come on over, baby, come on over. She was so playful with us. So I was very lucky that we were able to capture anything on the GoPro, because I'm working it blind.
The photograph of the penguins, they are, I mean, penguins are so beautiful to photograph anyway, aren't they? But you've got the one with the sideways snow, I think, as you were talking about, the weather was pretty vicious at times, wasn't it? And then you got this lovely, beautiful one again in the half light. It's not quite a silhouette, but a sort of silhouette picture, just almost singing to the clouds, singing to the sky.
Calling its mate, saying, "Come back, come back! I'm over here, I'm over here." But you know, that's when you can. The clouds were really quite interesting. It was a pretty dullish day. Like the sun wasn't peeking out of the clouds at all. Right. So I stopped down by 4 or 5 stops and really pulled out the sky and gave way to the detail of the penguin and used it more of a silhouette. So kind of having fun with that too. I think I mentioned to you, I went there with trying to be a more mindful clicker, or more thoughtful shooter. I shouldn't say shooter, but photographer. Or every time I press the click or my shutter, that maybe I was thinking a little bit more, or taking the time to think about it, not just kind of racing through these amazing moments. But as wildlife photographers, it's not always easy when you have lots of action happening in front of you and you've got 20 frames per second.
Well, particularly a skewer with a penguin egg. I mean, that's going to be something where you're having to use a burst, aren't you?
Absolutely.
That's not. I mean, that's a mindful moment, I suppose, in panning along with the skewer, but it's an altogether different way of photographing. Well, imagine the penguin, though, the one I was talking about, the sort of silhouette-ish kind of picture. That's a mindful moment, isn't it?
Exactly. Yeah, taking a scene, trying to figure out how to photograph it differently, and then waiting for the behavior to happen, or finding that right moment, finding that right scene with the penguin. That is, again, he was in a colony of say 1,000 pairs. So how do you look at 1,000 or 2,000 or 5,000 or even 100 different penguins in a same scene? They're all on the rookery. How do you look at that and photograph it? Sometimes it's easier to just kind of take bits and pieces of it rather than looking at it as a whole, and try to find one, or find that chick amongst the adults that's waiting for the parents' food, or finding one that the one penguin that's walking through the colony and kind of causing a kerfuffle with the others, and they start talking. There's so much that happens. Like, there's just activity all the time, from sound to sights to smell to behavior. So it's trying to find those little tidbits or those nuggets within a big story.
What advice are you giving out to those that are photographing in these places, perhaps for the very first time?
Because everybody's so varied in their photographic journey, a lot of people are still with DSLR. A few are with the mirrorless, with the bigger cameras, with the bigger lenses. Typically, I start with more of the creativity side, and talking about subject placement. I talk a lot about light, seeing the light, using the light, trying to work around not being able to get low to the ground, as we typically do with animals. If you're in close quarters, how do you share that story? What do you bring back? Because we all know, if we go away for a period of time on an adventure like this, you come home and people's attention spans are about, I don't know, maybe 22 seconds, 30 seconds. So what image are you going to show? Or if you have a chance to show 3 images from a journey to the Falklands, South Georgia, and Antarctica, what kind of images are you going to show? And it's much like what I had to send to you. It's like I have 40,000 images. So where do I go with that? What do I send Neil to talk about, or so he can see a vision of kind of where I went with my creativity while I'm there? So really being mindful again about your composition, your creativity, but also your story.
I'm pleased you mentioned subject placement, because the snow petrel in particular, that is about subject placement, because the snow petrel is a white bird and you've placed the bird in a fairly neutral palette in many respects, but the icebergs behind are blue and they beautifully show off the bird. Did you plan that, or are these moments where you think, thank God for the serendipity of this moment?
Absolutely. Thank God for 20 frames a second. Thank God for a really good Zodiac driver. And thank God that petrel flew, because I had white on white. I had the petrel on white. It was great, but I just wanted it against the blue of the iceberg. And the wind was whipping. We were probably at the max. I know we were at the max of what we would go out in. I don't remember how many knots the wind was, but it was really, really difficult. We were up against an ice pan, which was making it even more difficult for the Zodiac drivers to keep in placement. I had water whipping over the side of the Zodiac. Obviously salt water, hugely problematic for camera equipment. I had 8 other people in the Zodiac, or I was part of a Zodiac of 8. I'm sitting at the front. I'm trying not to, interfere with them. They're the passengers. They're the ones that are important. They're also, go, Michelle, go. And I'm on the ground and I'm on my knees and the Zodiac's moving and I got my 800 millimeter and I'm up and down and up and down. And then I decided to get the 180 to 6. I thought that was easier. And then they're like, petrol over here, petrol over there. Everyone's screaming for you because they want you to get the shot. And I'm like, I go to the right and the petrol's gone to the left. And then I go to the left and the petrol's gone to the right. So yeah, let's just say a whole lot of luck.
But there was some plan in it. By the sound of it, people saying to the left, to the right, you were planning for this. You were hoping for it.
Look at that iceberg. The iceberg is just so magnificent.
It's amazing. It's like, I don't know, they remind me of blue broccoli. But there's that kind of look to them. They're just, I've not seen an iceberg like that.
I'll never look at it the same. Blue broccoli. But it does. all the shapes and the forms, and it was just amazing. So extraordinary.
Yeah.
So it was like, okay, I'm not going to look to my right and I'm not going to look to my left anymore. I'm going to look to my just off center to the left, as long as my Zodiac driver could keep me in this position. And then he would have to move, right? So then we were traversing, because every time those waves came in, they were pushing us up against the ice. We had to back off. It was one of the hardest shoots I think I have ever experienced. And it was due to the fact that it was so dangerous, but also just the movement and the small white bird that is so magnificent in itself. And I wanted to photograph this. Like, there were snow petrels everywhere. It was just like, can you just and limited. We had probably 20 minutes there, 20 minutes. And there were crab eater seals on the ice, and it was just the movement and not being able to kind of stay in that one position waiting. Because, the Zodiac was moving all the time.
Am I seeing seals on the ice in front as well? No, I'm not.
On the front, more to the right if they were in. I don't think they were in that shot.
Certainly, now you mentioned it, the water looks quite rough.
It was rough.
The Zodiac going right on the edge of being able to use it by the sound of it.
And hands were frozen, and then we had these jackets, these team jackets, and the water was going in at your hands. Everything's wet, so then your hands are wet, and then you're touching your equipment, and I use lens covers and stuff, but then the lens covers were wet, and then you're like, oh, did I get any spray on my lens? And there's no time to actually ask somebody because they're looking too, and it was a crazy, crazy, crazy shoot. Yeah. It was crazy. And I was just so delighted that I was actually able to capture a couple of really great snow petrel shots that I was happy with.
Well, we'll put the pictures on the show page. Did you photograph everything you wanted to? Is there something that eluded you?
I would love to go back for the emperor penguins. I've never seen an emperor penguin. So I think if I did go back to Antarctica, it would have to include a trip to Snow Hill to see the emperor penguins.
Yeah. Well, they're fantastic pictures. I'm so pleased you came back to tell us that. And I really wanted to find out about your adventure. So thank you for that. But the adventures continue, as you say. It's not really on your back door, as you said, because it's 5 hours travel to get there anyway.
Well, that's just the flight, right?
That's just
The
the
flight is
flight.
5 hours. Then we have a 2-hour ferry ride, a 2-hour drive, and then another hour boat ride.
See? It's all very glamorous, though.
Oh, totally glamorous. Totally glamorous when you're freezing and it's snowing there today. It's supposed to be warm. It's snowing.
What's the temperature? Do you know?
It's about -1 to +1.
Okay. All
And
right.
maybe it might go up to 5 degrees or 6 degrees. I'm looking outside right here, and we've had I don't know about you guys. We see if you're Canadian, especially you have to talk about the weather. It's 14 degrees here today, and it's going down to -21 tonight, and then up to 9 degrees tomorrow. Yeah, it's extraordinary. It's so crazy.
Yeah.
It's great.
I'm used to when I talk to Canadians, they usually say it's -40, and I'm used to it.
14, and it's not even March. It's
know.
14 degrees here.
Yeah. Well, it's strange. Good luck for your next trip.
Thank you.
I look forward to seeing the pictures from that one as well. Do me a favour, try and find some sort of squirrel that I've never heard of before while you're there.
All right, I'm going to.
There must be something like a sea squirrel or something, surely.
We're gonna make one up.
A beautiful little white one with a bushy white tail, webbed feet.
Have you heard of an ermine? I was trying to find an ermine for you in Yellowstone last week.
No, I haven't. Are you making this up or is it real?
It's another little white rodent. You have to look at him. He's the cutest little thing you'll ever see. It's a little white squirrel.
An ermine.
Yeah.
Did you got a picture, obviously?
No, we didn't see one this year. We saw one last year, but I was looking for one for you. That's how much I talked to you once, and then now all of a sudden I'm in search of anything that looks like a squirrel just to photograph for you. I'm photographing the squirrels in my backyard.
I want to be your buddy that gets the weird squirrel pictures from now on in your life. I must get that one for Neil. He's never seen that one before.
And my thanks to Michelle Valberg for talking with us on the podcast this week, returning to talk with us on the show about her adventures a little bit further south this time. Still as chilly, by the sound of it. An absolute joy to hear the stories unfold from photographers who we've spoken with before on the programme, and other adventures and expeditions that they're making. We should do that more often, actually. It'd be nice to get some of our guests back. I'd love to talk to Joel Meyerowitz, in particular, about his exhibition in London, which is quite an extended exhibition since we're talking about exhibitions. If you can't wait until next Friday and you want to walk a little bit further together, then the Extra Mile Edition 423 is waiting for you. Valérie is back to talk about her beach project, a sort of part 2 of the On Ice chat, sort of, loosely. And I talk further about exhibitions, hosting your first My Own experiences, and the experiences of Kieran Beard, one of our Extra Milers who's hosting his first exhibition in Geneva next week.
On this week's Extra Mile.
The fear of not getting the shot has to become stronger than the fear of getting it.
So going through, I had a look to see what caught my eye, what I liked, what I always thought would look good printed out.
I walk the beach for hours every day, no matter the weather, the season. I love the rain. I love the storms. We're there as a family in the summer as well. So it's such a ever-changing scenery.
And I think that if people get a similar sort of enjoyment out of the photos that I do, then that's great as well. Or if they have a connection, whether it's emotional or whether they just like it for its aesthetics, that's the main thing for me.
The Extra Mile is part of our Patreon channel, where our wonderful community of supporters, our walkers and photographers who want to help keep this podcast here week after week, make a modest and generous monthly, or you can do it annually now, contribution to the show. I love this. I say I love this. I'm intrigued by it. Scheduled Ancient Monument 30905. This entire site, including fences, is protected under the Scheduled Ancient Monument Act. Damage to it will incur unlimited fines. Unlimited? God, who sets that? Well, nobody. It's unlimited, Neil. And imprisonment, what? Via the Crown Court. The owners will will press for maximum penalties without exception. I'm standing opposite one of the gates that at Greenham Common, where these missiles, the cruise missiles, were kept in silos. Now, years ago, I did actually get inside one of the silos to make a black and white film project. I have got it somewhere. I will share it with you one day. I don't think I'll be able to find it easily. It's in the loft, in the attic somewhere. But certainly signs like this were not out at that time. I suppose it is an ancient monument, or an important monument insofar as it's a monument commemorating, or the whole area there commemorates the Cold War. Commemorates, is that the right word? Certainly not celebrates. The Cold War. Yeah, I see it's protected unless you want to charge hundreds upon hundreds of thousands of pounds for it to be used as a set in the Star Wars movie. Oh, I see. Yeah, okay. When it suits. Right, Barnes, come on. Don't go anywhere near that. It's an ancient monument. Protected under, what was it, 30905. Locked up without bones for as long as you can think of. Yes. Right, PS to the show is to come, but before that we need a play-out song just to make some final frames to, or think about what's been said today. And it is from Samo and Ian Post with an instrumental number. And if I close my eyes, works very well with this epic journey today's guest Michelle Valberg made. And I'm going to recap some of Michelle's thoughts that she's made and given to us during her 2 visits to the programme here, during the music at some stage. So here's today's play-out song, which is now featured, by the way, on the show page. It was suggested the other day in our meetup, our Zoom meetup. Oh, who suggested it? Oh, I'm so sorry. I can't remember whose idea it was, and I don't want to attribute it to the wrong person. You know who you are. Thank you so much for that suggestion. It was very good. And I will be putting music links on the show page now. At least you can go and find out a little bit more about the artists, or the artistes who we feature. This one is called Home Journey.
The real natural world, to explore it, to appreciate it, to respect it. When I became a photographer, it became my mission to bring it to the world. If you can bring your viewer into what you're seeing or feeling, you know, how powerful is that? Absolutely. And it's not an easy thing to do. When you're in the position that you're seeing something that nobody else is seeing, or very few people are seeing, and you have the power with photography, with social, with your voice, with your imagery, it can make a huge difference. To be that close to them too, to look eye to eye with a humpback whale underwater, I find this all really hard to explain, as you can tell.
Dad's Home Journey. Ian Post, partnered by Samo. Just a few closing thoughts before the PS. My sincere thanks to you if you are or you're about to become an extra miler. My promise to you is to keep building this community of kindness, a safe place to share our thoughts about this thing we love, photography and walking. Now, on the show page, there are some very handy buttons that help you share the show. They're underneath the player, and also be sure to press that follow or subscribe button on your podcast app. Don't I sound like the YouTuber? Like and subscribe. My thanks to Neil Ford, who looks after IT, Andrea Gilpin, who's across Instagram, and Kelly Mitchell, with Emily Renier, who look after our Facebook members, write a postscript for the show. Today, since he was mentioned, a postscript from Sir Ernest Shackleton, perhaps the most famous polar explorer. British-Irish Shackleton led 2 significant Antarctic expeditions between 1907 and 1909, as well as 1914 to 1917. I think this quote can be taken either as a grand statement for big adventures, though I think you can apply it to the more modest ones as well, the micro adventures, the ones on our doorsteps. And the quote is this: "It's in our nature to explore, to reach out into the unknown. The only true failure will be not to explore at all."
The Photowalk is a Loading Zone production.